So we're now going to discuss the actual recruitment process, so what we can expect from young adults in the recruitment and assessment process. And certainly I'm hearing from a lot of employers that young adults are seemingly less prepared for interviews and assessment centres than perhaps in the past, perhaps haven't been given the sort of support they may historically have done at their schools and at their colleges. I'm hearing a lot of employers saying they're having to almost coach candidates to interview at their organisation, which I suspect a lot of employers wouldn't perhaps have done in the past, maybe would even think it's in some way sort of cheating. But actually, we want candidates to give the best of themselves, don't we? We want them to be able to evidence their transferable skills in a way that perhaps they don't understand how they can. So we're going to have a discussion now about what has changed in recent years and how employers can ensure that their recruitment and assessment processes are working as effectively as possible. So we're joined by a couple of kind of experts in recruitment who are going to kick off the discussion. So can I call on Adele, actually, Adele Conera? I know you're going to give us a bit of the benefit of your experience here, please.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. I think I'm just going to start with echoing something that Christoph said. Don't forget the basics. Remember, we're not talking about a different race. We're talking about humans like the rest of us, and they want to ultimately feel valued, listened to, supported, considered and understood. So keep those kind of thoughts at the basis of any recruitment process. That being said, things have changed a lot over the last few years, and I think we had the opportunity in a lot of organisations, large and small, to review how we did things in recruitment through the pandemic, because we had to get with the program, get up with the times, use technology. And I think that's actually been to everybody's benefit. That's enabled us to increase flexibility of how and when we recruit, and ultimately that recruitment process and people's experience of that recruitment process. So I think what to expect in terms of those coming into your recruitment process, I think, you know, energy, curiosity, excitement, are all those kind of positive vibes that you'll get. I think a key learning for me has been to consider the pace of your recruitment process. I think we've all acknowledged that the world we operate in now is, particularly those for those leaving education, the world is a lot more instant, accessible. There's a lot more information at the push of a button, and I think the recruitment process should reflect that. Use technology. Like I say, during the pandemic, we had to, through necessity, use more video technology, the use of video CVs. I've seen a lot more. You know, a flat two-dimensional paper CV may not be the way forward. We've looked at different means of interactive CVs, whereby there are, and I can share some different technologies if anyone's interested. I can't promote one. But, you know, a two-dimensional CV plus the opportunity for candidates to answer 3 key questions via video about themselves or about why they're interested in a role. It's more interesting for you in terms of the recruitment process. You can see your candidate, and also more familiar potentially to those entering the recruitment process. I think it's the days of long assessment centres are probably behind us, again due to the need for information share, being reactive. I think looking at maybe shorter processes. We're in a world now where you know, no-shows are much more common in my experience than they have been historically, and I think that is partly because it's easier. It's easier to send a message or an email, or not interact, or feel like you're not dealing with a real human being at an employer. Also, sometimes, well, there are often a lot more opportunities, and if a process is too long, you've got more opportunity to lose your candidates within that. So I think finding various ways of sharing as much information about your organisation, the roles available, be honest, echoing what everyone said already, be honest and be real, and and talk about your organisation as a whole, but share that information through a variety of means, not necessarily just at an assessment day or just at an interview. So I think they're probably the key things for me at the moment in terms of how things are different to maybe a few years ago.
Fantastic. No, thank you, Adele. Really, really insightful. Lorraine, can I get your thoughts here on what might have changed in recent years?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing to, the first point to make here is that we are generally in the backdrop of a candidate short market. We are about to enter a supply-led recession as opposed to a demand-led recession, and that is very, very different, in particular for the talent space. So again, just a couple of facts from this. So again, our latest salary guide states that 77% of employers believe they will have competition from others, when recruiting, entry level younger individuals. And 82% believe there will continue to be those shortages this year. So regardless, there is that talent shortage, and in particular at in this area. So that's happening. I think the second point to mention, which can also be an advantage, and totally agree with Adele's comments, in that we have been through a digital revolution because of COVID. Some of us might not wanted to go on it, but we've all been thrown into this digital revolution, and the younger generations are really comfortable with it. So what that means is you can be a bit more creative with your recruitment process and also follow DE&I a little bit more. So by that, I mean, from employers, I would encourage you to use blind CVs if you use a CV at all. So there is no unconscious bias, because we all have unconscious bias. And then, that digital platform idea, whereas, you can ask, I love what Adele said, ask them some key questions, get them to have 2 minutes on a video. They're really comfortable with that. And it goes back to your point as well, Gareth, those softer skills are so important. The technical is a tick almost if someone's got that potential, but those softer skills we know are so important. So you can utilize that to make a real difference and reflect on your recruitment process. Then also you can use digital technology, as in the first interview, I would advise it to be on a digital platform like Zoom or like Teams. And then you can have a robust process where someone could actually meet 3 or 4 people in your firm, but do it in the afternoon in their home. And also what I would say as well, again, there's been lots of stats which have demonstrated that individuals from a social mobility perspective, individuals who maybe they have not had the opportunity to go into, let's say, central London to a large office, and they are less intimidated actually being at home, so we'll actually do better in the first interview. So there's lots of reasons why I think digital technology is amazing. However, as I've already alluded to, I believe it still is about that personal connection. Like Adele said, the human beings, it is about that personal connection. So if you put them through this, half a day where they've met with individuals, everyone's feeling good, keep the process robust, get them in, within a few days, they're bought into you, but then get them to have that genuine connection. Don't just meet with, like you say, the partners, meet with individuals that are trainees, get to spend a little bit of time with them. And that combination, I think, is absolutely, it's so powerful, and the majority of candidates would accept your role. And get the basics right always. I know Christos has mentioned that, and I totally agree with him. But from a salary perspective, what I would say is, it's like keep calm and don't panic. Pay market rate. Pay market rate. There are so many other things to concentrate on, and keep aligned and make sure you are paying market rate. I think 1 or 2 things just to be mindful of as well. We've talked about EVP. We've talked about what makes you special. Make sure you have that ready. yeah, and it's genuine. I think also be happy with a bit more of a two-way interaction, and by that be ready to sell yourself a little bit. That sounds slightly crude, doesn't it? But what I mean is, if you're engaging with this individual and you really like them and you feel they could fit in with your firm or organization, make sure you're really giving them something back, you know, and they've really got that connection with you. And the last point for me is just be aware that there is a large range of motivators. It doesn't mean that the younger generation are flaky, but it might not be a linear it might not be a linear motivator, and there could be lots of other motivators, but they still may want to be with you for the long term. So they might be very open and honest about their career plan, and it might be that they're not going to be a partner in your firm, but nevertheless that they still might want to stay with you for the long term. So it's just being aware of that and not being shocked by that.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Lorraine. Actually, can I bring in Colin actually into the discussion at this stage? Colin, I don't know if you might introduce yourself and give, you know, first any reflections on what Adele and Lorraine have said so far.
Hi everyone. So yeah, I'm Colin. I'm head of people and talent at a company called Flinder, which is a data and accountancy firm. What I would say is, before I talk, my background's very vast of training, HR and recruitment. And so I suppose to add to a lot of the already great comments everyone's thrown here, I kind of see a little bit more patterns of the three connected. There's one thing that everyone's sort of skirting around, which is the word I would use is empathy, which is the biggest challenge we have, actually not even in the Gen Z, it's in the millennial group as well, and less so my group and older. But it's where technology sort of kicked in the sort of the noughties that's overrun that human connection. And actually, I think the millennial group, and I'm going to digress a lot, but the millennial group probably saw the MTV crowd and everything else as the big picture, and now we've reverted back. So I actually think there's huge opportunity and greats that's going to come out of Gen Z and the younger generation, because they're more savvy compared to what the millennials went through around technology. But what I would say in terms of where they're very savvy, what they haven't learned, and this is where the disconnect in recruitment happens, is the older generation are connected to a traditional recruitment process, a traditional mindset, a traditional expectation of people. And this is where it's not just from a business perspective, but from a candidate perspective, we have to educate them in the process a little bit, which is a comment you made before, people coaching people through the recruitment process. So, you know, not only have we had a hybrid working and hybrid interviewing process, we do that at Flinder as well in our process. So we do some of it on Zoom, some of it in person. You get the best of both worlds for people. But even like expectations of what people should wear for interview, what that process should look like, people don't understand what that looks like. So, and what I have done at Flinder, which is quite unique potentially, is I've got specific recruitment processes that are very different depending on role and level, because there's a large chance that there's an age demographic that goes with it, without being ageist, but being transparent around that. So for our sort of entry level program, yes, I can get them to do Zooms and make them very comfortable in doing that. But what I do at the very beginning, before we even go to that, is talk them very honestly. And I would promote this to anyone: when you're talking to someone about a business, warts and all is an expression an old director used to say to me. Tell them and be vulnerable to them about your business. Be honest and show empathy to them. They'll show empathy to you of the challenges you have, of where you're a growing business or lessons you're learning, how you're improving your business and trying to move forward in a business. They really buy into the fact that you're willing to let them in quite early on, instead of this sort of MTV shadow that everyone wants to put on to their business. And then show them how you're looking to improve things, make things better, and how they can have their own sense of power in their role and input in the business. And then when you bring them through the process, what I have done is brought a process which is like a hybrid between an assessment open day, a short version of, and actually just having a small group of people in an office, actually just sitting amongst people, getting people to come to the table, seeing the environment in its reality, what it feels like, getting the CEO to come and say hi in its informality will make people very comfortable in the process. So the more you can make a process more real and comfortable, the more empathetic and understanding the candidates can be. So I think there's some real importance at that sort of level, just to get them to meet the real business rather than it be a traditional interview. And it's coaching them in a very different way. This is going to be a very different process. You're going to be sitting amongst people. There's probably an element of anxiety that they're going to feel from that. But every person that comes out, whether they're successful or not, in the process that I do, are massive fans of the business and the process, regardless of they're successful or not. And that's the biggest brand reward you can get, is the fact someone can walk away and go, what a business, I'd love to work there. Sadly, you weren't successful, but keep in touch. There might be another opportunity in the future. And I still get people message me, even being unsuccessful. Oh, when's the next time we're recruiting that role? Can we keep in touch? Because they've had such a great experience. And I can't recommend it enough. Just getting a small group of people in the middle of your office in an open space and getting them to see the people and talking to them, getting the managers to be involved in that process right in front of you is so inspiring for them and your young managers. In a lot of businesses that are probably quite new to the interviewing process, you're re-educating as well as helping young people at the same time. So that's the process I do at Flinder, and I don't know what people's views are to that, but I think that's really quite impactful, that one.
Yeah, no, it sounds fantastic. Clearly, you know, if they're staying in touch after an unsuccessful interview, they're, you know, clearly very engaged. Christos, I know you've got a 5-stage model that you like, and I'm thinking that the 4th of your 5 stages is actually quite relevant to this discussion, if you want to give some thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And Colin, loved what you were saying there, by the way. We even, in our own company, when we recruit for ourselves, we actually allow candidates to interview their manager. And we flip the script, which goes down really well. But yeah, I was just thinking of that as you were talking. So yeah, I want to kind of come back to the model really, and hopefully just echo a lot of what's been said, and also hopefully, Gareth, try and help you summarize a little bit. So I think there's been a lot of discussions which have been amazing. I think we've looked at the inspire and attraction starts before you're live. We've discussed all the amazing stuff around attraction, EVPs, sharing your salary, etc., etc. We discussed getting out there on engagement and doing all that amazing proactive reach out. And that's amazing. And we feel like we're almost there, but we're not quite there just yet. So I think all that is amazing. But I kind of like to then say, if you've got a leaky bucket at the end of all that, then we're going to run into a problem. So this is where we come on to the kind of select and support bit, really. And hopefully just echo a lot of what's been said already. So one of the things we see on Get My First Job from a lot of employers is kind of send us your CV and cover letter. Well, up to about 50% of the database, about 900,000 people on Get My First Job, typically don't have a registered CV. So we've talked a lot about the struggles to kind of attract and engage candidates. Actually, just think about sometimes some of the talent pools you're potentially putting off. Often when we really quiz employers on why they're asking for that CV, quite often they say it's just because we want to see what grades they've got and then take that as entry requirement. You don't need to ask for a CV in order to do that. There's different ways in order to do that. Second bit to that really is just determine why you need each step in that process. I think we've seen a lot of long recruitment processes and we're now seeing those getting shorter. I think it's really interesting that UCAS recently are looking and dropping the personal statement because they found it favors the middle class. So if you just kind of look at that kind of what UCAS is saying and you look at that kind of what we're seeing on the CV bit, your typical send us your CV and cover letter, just think about potentially what that's doing and what candidates that's potentially putting off. So similar to what Adele was saying, we actually utilize video interviews a lot as well. We utilize it for likes of Microsoft, BMW Group, Meggitt, Schneider Electric, etc. So we work with a lot of employers where we see that working really well. And what I would just say on that is giving candidates a chance to practice, have a second go, works really well. And last but not least on that select bit, just make sure you review those entry requirements. I think particularly in this sector, and I'm dared to even allow to say that, sometimes maybe the entry requirements are quite significant and maybe just have a look at, do we really need to ask for the equivalent of 3 A stars or kind of that top maths GCSE grade? Could we just look at why that is rather than it's kind of what we've always done? And I think just to quickly paint some data on that, I've kind of took this from the Institute of Student Employers data. And what you'll see here is it kind of looks like the number of employers utilizing 2-1 going down as that kind of top line. You'll see the kind of A-level requirements kind of coming down the yellow line and that purple line around the no minimum. So, you know, we've all heard the likes of PwC dropping the 2-1 requirement. I just can't emphasize enough, really review those entry requirements and why you need what you need. And then last but not least, I think Maisie said a lot of this amazingly. But that support piece, so before they join, really managing those responses and expectations. We work with employers to kind of utilize human engagement at every single touch point. It's almost like a bit of a dirty word now, saying human engagement. Like everyone's on about the AI and the tech and all the rest of it. Just remember, candidates are still people and they still want that kind of human touch point. And sometimes some candidates prefer us to text them, some prefer phone. So it's just giving that choice as well to talk them through. Renege rates are a record high in the market, to that point where a candidate accepts an offer and then later goes elsewhere. I think, dare I'm even allowed to say this, but sometimes employers are a victim of their own practices on that one. So really just coming back to that engagement, managing expectations clearly. We're seeing a lot of employers now trying to wrap up before exam season. So really trying to close down recruitment processes by April, May at the latest is something we're seeing a lot at the moment. And as we were saying on that engage side, it takes about 3 to 10 touch points to get someone into a process. We typically see it takes about 3 to 10 touch points to keep candidates in that process. So yes, a lot of work, but quite doable when you don't look at maybe masses of applications and really focus in on what you need. So yeah, I think, Gareth, that is everything from me. And if anybody would like the model, then feel free to drop me an email or a LinkedIn message.
Brilliant, appreciate that, Christos. Thank you very much. Maisie, can I actually come to you for any thoughts you've got on this area?
I think the main takeaway for today has got to be authenticity. I want to echo what Colin said about kind of welcoming new candidates into the environment and being able to offer that kind of 360 view. And it's not just being put in front of head of HR or a manager, it's being able to touch points different people. We want to start trialing actually inviting our trainees to interviews. So someone will come into interview, they will have that interview with whoever is going to conduct it. So potentially it will be head of HR or a manager, but in the last 10 minutes, that manager will leave the interview and a trainee will come in who will be at the level that they're interviewing for. So they can ask some honest questions and get some honest feedback about actually working for the company at that level. And that is going to create the most authentic version of an interview process and kind of a full view of the firm that we can actually at this point in time. I really like what Lorraine said about doing kind of a virtual interview. I think that also does actually help test IT skills before they join as well. I think I just want to come back to a social media that hasn't been mentioned yet, and I don't know how many people on this call would have heard of Be Real. And so this is a new social media where they will get a ping on their phone. It's like, you've got 2 minutes to take a picture of what you're doing right now. You do not have time to stage your beautiful life. You don't have time to run to the top of a hill. You've got to take it at this point in time, and this is what you're doing. And so people get an actual accurate point of what you were doing at 9:57 on a Tuesday morning, rather than kind of staging your life. So yeah, that's kind of my last takeaway on that.
Thank you, Maisie. I photobombed my 16-year-old's Be Real a couple of days ago and she nearly killed me. I don't think she wanted her dad in it, to be honest. Colin, just very quickly, any final observations from you?
I suppose just looking at a couple of things here that I noted before and just general observations. I think the only other thing I would probably reflect on for young people is, and I do emphasize here, I think this goes back to the report where we were talking about, like, young people, do they feel like they've actually got enough information? And it's funny that it comes out, because I think there's so much information, but it almost feels like misinformation. I think we need to learn to sort of segregate what information is out there that's not relevant and is in the past. We need to kind of move on from, I'll give you an example. I had a debate with somebody, I won't mention who, about a 2-page CV. That blows my mind. Like, we're not in 1995 anymore. 2-page CV doesn't matter. That should not be a rule. Like, stuff like that that's out there confuses young people, and it actually confuses managers who are trying to interview and select people and basing information based on that. That's terrible advice. A 2-page CV, is it relevant? Yes, that's all that matters. Whether it's 2 pages, 1 page, or 28 pages, I don't care, generally speaking. And it's things like that that we need to educate and really support young people in, that they do get the right advice. And that's probably the only thing, whether that's me inputting that in the process or any process you have, and guiding people, re-educating managers that are in part of the hiring process to help young people, because they need education. I need to educate in the business that are involved in interviewing as well. That's really important. And yeah, just less rubbish out there and better information for young people, I think is so important. Is my only
fantastic. I think it's that broad point of just not doing things because it's what you've always done, but just checking the logic and the relevance of those sorts of things. Last 30 seconds, Lorraine, have you got any final points you want to come back to since you start us off?
I think that what we have is a generation of individuals that do still want to do very well. They do care and they want to have a meaningful career for themselves, but actually they want individuals that work with them and ultimately for them to be happy and to be content. The language is different, and whilst it's still different for us, I think if we embrace it and we meet in the middle, I think it will be a really great way for us to all evolve, and I think it will be a great thing for firms and for organisations.
Fantastic. Thank you to Lorraine, and thank you to the rest of our speakers this morning, and thanks to everyone who's been inputting through the chat box. I think that has been absolutely fascinating.